We shall get. There we go. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll start off with our reading, and this is Acts chapter 22. We probably will be able to get all of this in. Again, we're on the road now. 2 full chapters last 2 weeks, maybe another one this week.
Men and brethren and fathers, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you.
And when they heard that he spake in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silence. And he saith,
I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God, as ye all are this day. And I persecuted this way unto the death, binding and delivering into prison both men and women, as also the high priest doth bear me witness, and all the estate of the elders, from whom also I received letters unto the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring them which were there bound unto Jerusalem for to be punished. And it came to pass, that as I made my journey, and was come nigh unto Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me. And I fell unto the ground, and heard a voice saying unto me, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And I answered, Who art thou, Lord? And he said unto me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. And they that were with me saw indeed the light, and were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spake to me. And I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said unto me, Arise and go into Damascus, and there it shall be told thee of all things which are appointed for thee to do. And when I could not see for the glory of that light, being led by the hand of them that were with me, I came into Damascus. And one Ananias, a devout man, according to the law, having a good report of all the Jews which dwelt there, came unto me, and stood, and said unto me, Brother Saul, receive thy sight. And the same hour I looked up upon him. And he said, The God of our fathers hath chosen thee, that thou shouldest know his will, and see the just one, and shouldest hear the voice of his mouth. For thou shalt be his witness unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. And now why tarriest thou? Arise and be baptized, and wash away thy sins, calling on the name of the Lord. And it came to pass, that when I was come again to Jerusalem, even while I prayed in the temple, I was in a trance, and saw him saying unto me, Make haste, and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. And I said, Lord, they know that I imprisoned and beat in every synagogue them that believed on thee. And when the blood of thy martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by, and consenting unto his death, and kept the raiment of them that slew him. And he said unto me, Depart, for I will send thee far hence unto the Gentiles.
They gave him audience unto his word, and then lifted up their voices and said,
Away with such a fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live.
As they cried out, and cast off their clothes, and threw dust into the air, the chief captain commanded him to be brought into the castle, and bade that he should be examined by scourging, that he might know wherefore they cried so against him. And as they bound him with thongs, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by,
Is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman, and uncondemned?
When the centurion heard that, he went and told the chief captain, saying,
Take heed what thou doest, for this man is a Roman.
Then the chief captain came and said unto him,
Tell me, art thou a Roman?
He said,
Yea.
And the chief captain answered,
With a great sum obtained I this freedom.
And Paul said,
But I was freeborn.
Then straightway they departed from him which should have examined him, and the chief captain also was afraid, after he knew that he was a Roman, and because he had bound him. On the morrow, because he would have known the certainty wherefore he was accused of the Jews, he loosed him from his bands, and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them.
All right. Now that's chapter 22. And as you can see, it's kind of right to the point. And it's tailing off of what we saw on last week. Now remember, on last week, where Paul went down, and he was going from his travels throughout all the nations within Asia and around the Mediterranean and so forth. And he traveled, and he kept saying that he had to get to Jerusalem. And we talked about that, how that when he got to various places, he had different disciples that actually came up to him, and the disciples said to him through the what? Through the Spirit, that thou shalt what? Not go. And then even Agabus, one of the prophets, came and told Paul that the man that's going to be, that owns his belt, when he goes to Jerusalem, he's going to be what? Bound. All right? But yet Paul said, I'm not afraid, I want to go, and he decided to go anyway. All right? So what we see then is when he got down there, there was an uproar because the people thought that he was bringing a Gentile person into the temple. And you can see that if we go back to the last chapter, verse 29. You see where it says, for they had seen therefore with him in the city Trophimus, an Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. And now the Jewish people were already mad with him. Plus, he also had a lot of the people from the other Gentile cities that were upset with him because of his preaching of Christ when he went to all of these other Gentile nations. And they were upset because they were causing the believers there to stop patronizing these people that made the idols and the various means that they, through their false worship, were able to produce income. And so Paul was making it a havoc. He's giving them problems, and he's cutting into their what? Their business. And so Paul is really making a very bad name for himself as far as, him being, a person you want to sit down and have, cheese and crackers with. He just was like one of these type of people that no matter where he went, he had an uproar. People were always upset with him. One of the reasons why they were upset with him, because each of these individuals, each of these groups did not want to hear the truth. That's the first thing. Always keep that in mind. All right. One thing that no matter where Paul went, whether he would have went to Jerusalem or, as we'll see here, there was another direction that he could have gone. No matter where he was going to go, because he was a truth teller, people don't like to hear the truth. They don't want to hear it. And they're not going to be just excited about it. Now, a lot of times the truth is not always a pleasant thing, because one of the things that is important for us to keep in mind, if you want to know the truth about you and me and all the rest of us, that we are sinners. All right? And God sees us as, in our pure form, as the Bible says, as filthy rags, which need to be discarded. These are not rags that you wash and clean. These are rags that you get rid of. And but yet at the same time, he loves us. So therefore, he doesn't want to discard us. So though he sees us as filthy rags, he brings forth our salvation by giving us a covering. And our covering is Jesus Christ. Well, the thing to keep in mind is that he doesn't call us filthy rags for nothing. He calls us filthy rags because our motives, our directions, our thinking, the Bible says that the ways of our heart are wicked and deceitful. That's how we are, in our core. Though we try and we attempt to do things without God in our life, we're going to drift towards selfishness. We're going to drift towards idolatry. We're going to drift towards all kinds of things that are against what Scripture tells us we should be. So therefore, we have to struggle, and I underline the word struggle, to swim against the current of our sinful nature and follow Christ. That's our walk with the Lord. All right? So therefore, in doing that, we find ourselves a lot of times confused, bewildered, not sure what to do. And we're going to see that this is very similar to what happens with Paul. So Paul is in a situation, and he's discussing stuff, and the people in the temple are upset with him, and they grab Paul, and they're getting ready to, really take him out. The officials of the town don't want to riot, so they send some of the authorities down there. They grab Paul, they lift him up, and bring him over to where the castle is. And the soldiers have to lift Paul up in the air to keep people from sucker punching him. That's how bad it is. And so they finally get there, And as chapter 21 ends and chapter 22 picks up, we see that Paul is saying that he would like to say something to the people. All right? And so chapter 22 opens up with what he says. So he says, men, brethren, and fathers. He's really trying to be diplomatic here. He says, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you. And there's a Greek word here, which, I don't know how to say it, but we get our word apologetics from it. Have you ever heard somebody talk about Christian studies of apologetics? What that means is defense of the gospel. How do you defend what you believe? And there's a whole theological teaching behind all that. But I just figured I'd throw that in there, because if you ever hear that word, you know some of the, and if you wanted to go into a lexicon and get all the deep meanings, you can start right here from Acts 22:1 and get the meaning of that word apologetics, and you can go off on your study. I just figured I'd mention it. I ain't going to touch it any further with that. But in verse 2, it says, and when they heard that he spake in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept even the more silent. And he said, okay, so now they recognize it. Wow, this guy is speaking in the Hebrew tongue. He knows Hebrew. So now they really want to hear what he's got to say. All right? And they listen. And he says, I am verily a man which am a Jew, born of Tarshish, a city of Cilicia, yet brought up in the city at the feet of Gamaliel. Now he mentions Gamaliel as being a very prominent teacher. All right? That's like somebody saying, I went to school and I was taught by Einstein. All right? People would recognize that okay, well, here's somebody that obviously got some real good teaching from one of your greats intellectually. All right? So Paul mentions him with the understanding that the people that he's talking to will know who this is. We know who Gamaliel is. All right? The people are saying, oh, you got taught by him? Okay. And so he goes on. And taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous towards God. All right? As ye all are today. Now, this is important to underline, because what you see here is how Paul identifies with the crowd, with this mob. Paul is saying, I was zealous towards God, just like all of y'all are here today. You all want to kill me because y'all think I've done something wrong according to the scripture. And that's okay. I used to be like that, too. I was that same way. So he's trying to do what? Identify. And he's trying to bring a commonality to it. All right? So he's showing, look, I'm not that much different than you. Well, let's keep reading. Verse 4. And I persecuted this way unto the death. See what Paul is saying? And remember, back then they called the Christian walk, people that follow Christ, as the way. So when he says, I persecuted this way unto the death, Paul is admitting there were some people I helped get put to what? To death. All right? Binding and delivering into prison both men and women. And also the high priest doth bear me witness, and all the estate of the elders, from whom I have received letters unto the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring them which were bound unto Jerusalem. All right, so he's now recounting his last mission, where he got a letter to go to where? Damascus, to grab some people of this way, bind them up, and to bring them back to Jerusalem. All right, for to be punished. Verse 6. And it came to pass that as I made my journey, and was come nigh unto Damascus, about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me. Now, what he's getting ready to do now is retell the story that happened to him that we went through earlier on in the book of Acts. You remember the story where Paul was on his way. He's telling just like it happened, and he was going there after he had shortly after he had witnessed to the death of Stephen, one of the followers of Christ that was telling the Jewish leaders of that day of their folly, how they were not really serving God properly, and they didn't like hearing him because Stephen was telling the what? Truth. They didn't want to hear that. You gonna tell me that I'm wrong and my mom, somebody walk up to you, even if you are wrong, somebody gonna walk up to you, and you know what? You wrong, your mama's wrong, and your mama's wrong. Well, that may be true, but you gonna feel some heat. You gonna want to look. Who are you talking to, right? But that's the reality of it is. And so Stephen's, not to say that he said it with that kind of fervor and attitude, but he told them the truth. He says, which one of your fathers did the prophets not kill? Name me one that they didn't kill. Your forefathers were bad. And so the fact that y'all want to kill me means that y'all definitely following in y'all parents' footsteps. You got the same bug that they had. All right? And so, so Paul was in agreement to that, and he's going to talk about this even as he gives his recount here. But we see that he had these letters. All right, and he was going down there, and he's retelling the story. So let's just go through the remembrance of this. Verse 7, he says, and I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying unto me, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou what? Me. So when Paul was, who was Saul at this time, was persecuting the believers, Jesus said that he was actually persecuting who? Jesus. Exactly. Jesus said, you're persecuting me. You're persecuting the Lord. You think you're hurting these people, but you really are attacking me because it's me in them that you don't like. Remember, Jesus said, if they hate me, they will what? Hate you. And the world can see somehow, and I use the word see as just perceive, those that don't want to know Jesus know that you know Jesus. How they perceive it, I can't tell you. I don't know the physics behind it. But Jesus lets us know the world that hates me will hate you. Why? Because they will see me in you. That's one good thing to recognize. When you find yourself battling and struggling and going up, down, up grain all the time and always having, these issues and it's a surefire sign that they're fighting against the God that's in you. And you got to be able to just recognize, well, you know what? It's part of the territory. We look at sometimes, you look at people that do all kinds of craziness and it's like, well, why are they prospering? Why they got millions? Why they got house on the hill? Why they got all this? And then what do I have? But you have to come to the conclusion that it doesn't amount to that. It's not what I have, it's who I know. That is the ultimate thing about eternity. Because remember, this life is but a flicker. Eternity is reality. And that's what we live for. We got to live for eternity. We can't be so concerned about this time here. Though we still want to be able to, have our food and be warm and have a place to eat and have clothes on our back and so forth and so on. But we got to make sure that we look at that as not the ultimate of priorities. Our ultimate priority is that we know the Lord for eternity. And sometimes we're human and we can struggle with that. But at the same time, it's always good to know that we can fall back and relax and say, you know what? It's all about me knowing God, knowing Jesus throughout all eternity. All right? So in verse 8, Paul goes on and he continues to tell the story. And he says, and I answered and said, who art thou, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. He's letting them know again, you're persecuting me. Right? And in our study, we talked about that, pretty much in depth. So we'll kind of glance over it now. Verse 9, it says, and they that were with me saw indeed the light and were afraid, but they heard not the voice. Now, as you see that Paul gives, he's going to give a few accounts of this. And one account is going to say that they heard noise. Another account here, it says that they heard no voice. The thing to keep in mind is that those accounts don't contradict. in one account, it's talking about they heard noise, but they didn't hear phonic understanding. In other words, they could hear that there was something there, but they couldn't understand what it was, what they were saying. So, in both accounts, the understanding and the point that Paul is trying to get across is the people with him could not comprehend what was being said. Now, the reason I bring that up is that a lot of people that try to say that the Bible is full of errors will say, well, at one time Paul says that they didn't hear nothing, and other time they said they heard some noise. But in both things, it's like, I couldn't hear what you were saying. So to say I didn't hear nothing doesn't mean I didn't understand anything. So the understanding is what was void in that communication that Paul heard. Nobody else got any understanding. Everything else was noise. So there is no real contradiction there, although people that want to attack the Bible, they look for little stuff like that. And once again, that's a study that if you want to really get deep into it, you can find all the 3 instances where Paul rehashes the story and compare, and you can see that there's really no conflict. Verse 10, and I say, and I said, what shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said unto me, arise and go to where? Damascus. And there you shall be told thee all the things which are appointed for thee to do. Now I find it interesting that we talked about this when we went through this, but I want to just highlight it again here. That when Paul, who was Saul at the time, asked the Lord Jesus, what should he do? He just told him, you just go to Damascus, and then I'll tell you there what you need to do. Because he was going to have the instructions come to him from another person. Now, I'm bringing this up because a lot of times we ask ourselves, well, why don't God speak to me? Or, I wish God would speak. And then the answer is, he does. He does speak to us. Oftentimes the issue is that because we want him to speak to us a certain way, and we are locked into it, this is how I expect God to speak to me. When God says, I will speak to you in a variety of ways, and if you listen, and if you hear, Jesus said oftentimes, he that has an ear, let him what? Hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. So it's important that you recognize that when Jesus said, I will never leave you nor forsake you, that is true. Oftentimes what happens is that we think that we're by ourselves because we don't see him present, physically, speaking directly. When he says that he is with us, he never leaves us, he's always with us, and he's not just sitting always with us silent. He's always with us, encouraging us, talking to us, giving us insight, helping us through the day. And a lot of times we're either ambivalent to it, we're either ignoring it, or we're fighting against it, or what's the other option? We listen sometimes. So a lot of times we'll find ourselves in one of those circumstances where the Lord is speaking to us through everyday situations, everyday people. Right? And that's important. I'm going to insert this here real quick. Me and Penny went to go see the movie last night, The Adjustment Bureau. And I'm not going to give away the plot. I know you want to go see it. But I went to go see the movie The Adjustment Bureau. And I thought it was interesting. It was interesting. I mean, there was some pros and cons. I like movies like that because it helps me to understand how people are thinking. People that write these books and write these screenplays and so forth, and it's kind of interesting to me, their mindset. But anyway, in this movie, there was something very significant that talked about our inability to know when we're given instruction. That's all I'm gonna say. It's a good picture. After everyone sees it, maybe we'll do a chat and chew one day. When the movie comes out on DVD, we'll rent it, get some food, watch the movie, and just eat some food and talk about it. Because I think it brings out some very interesting points on how we think about certain things. And I'll leave it at that before Selena gets mad and runs. She's giving me the eye. All right. So But we see here, Jesus is letting Paul know, I'm going to give you some instruction. I'm going to tell you what to do, but you got to go down to Damascus to receive it. In the verse 11, it says, "And when I could not see for the glory of the light, being led by the hand of them that were with me, I came to Damascus. And one Ananias, a devout man, according to the law, having a good report of all the Jews which dwelt there, came unto me and stood and said unto me, Brother Saul, receive thy sight. And the same hour I looked upon him." In other words, I was able to see him. "And he said, The God of our fathers have chosen thee." Now this is his instruction. Paul is getting his instruction from who? From Ananias. "The God of our fathers have chosen thee, that thou shouldst know his will, and see that the just one, and should hear the voice of his mouth. For thou shalt be a witness unto what? Unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. And now, why tarriest thou? Arise and be baptized. Wash away your sins, calling on the name of the Lord. And it came to pass that when I was come again to Jerusalem, even while I prayed in the temple, I was in a what? In a trance." All right, now let's talk about this. We're going to really, when we get into Paul's writing, Paul's going to really discuss this in depth. But I think it's important to recognize that in a trance, what does that mean? Was he dreaming? Was he? I don't know. I don't have the expertise because I wasn't there and I wasn't examining him. I just know that he was in an altered state of what? Consciousness. Some kind of way of thinking that was a little bit different than the normal everyday way. All right? So he says, the one he was in this trance, in verse 18, this is what happened. He said, "And I saw him saying unto me, Make haste and get thee quickly out of" where? Let's read this again. "Make haste, get thee quickly out of" where? He told him to leave where? All right, keep that in mind. What was Paul stressing to get to? Okay, but yet, anybody have a red letter Bible edition? Is this in red?
Yep.
Okay, so this is who's speaking.
Jesus.
Okay. "Get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me." What did Jesus tell Paul? People in Jerusalem, what? Will not receive your testimony concerning me. What does that mean? Exactly. Exactly. All right. That's and that's the reason why I asked that, is because you can't really enhance that. Get out of Jerusalem, because the people in Jerusalem are not going to what? They're not going to listen to you concerning me, concerning Jesus. He said. So then, Paul is like, all right. Well, before I get into it, let's read it. I don't want to get ahead. This is Paul's response to what Jesus just told him. Verse 19. "And I said, Lord, they know that I am in prison and beaten in every synagogue." Lord, they know that I have been in prison and I have been beaten in every synagogue. "They that believe upon thee. And when the blood of thy martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by." He's letting the Lord know, like the Lord didn't know about it. Remember, remember when Stephen was dying and he looked up to heaven and he saw who? He saw Jesus standing there. All right, standing by. He said, "I was standing by, and consenting unto his death, and keeping the raiment of them that slew him." All right, verse 21. "And he said unto me," what? "Depart." Leave. Depart. "For I will send you. I will send thee. For hence unto the who? Jerusalem, is that the Gentiles?
No.
That's not, is it? So we see this struggle. And the reason why I bring this up is because Paul, I think, and I have to just put my own kind of spin on this, and so understand that this is just me thinking, trying to put a puzzle together. In my mind, I see Paul as being so hurt, so disappointed with himself, that he put all these people that were of Jewish descent to death, brought them into prison, men and women, because they were following Jesus. His own brethren, his own, kindred. And then when he came to believe in Jesus, he now can't get that out of his mind. He's like, man, this is really... And he wants to do what? He wants to fix it. He wants to he is determined, I got to get to Jerusalem and I got to try to make good some of the mess I made. I killed people because they were following this way of Christ. Now I want to go back to that place where I made my mistake and try and fix it. But what did the Lord tell him?
No.
They're not going to hear you. And sometimes we think that we know, but Paul is like, I know if they see me and they look at me who was so zealous. Remember, that's how he opened up. I was zealous just like what? Just like you guys are. I wanted to kill people others way just like you guys wanted to. So he's trying to what? Identify with them. And he's like, if I can get them to see how I was and see that that's just how they are, but look at how I have transformed my thinking, then maybe they will too. And Paul is putting 2 and 2 together, and he's thinking he's going to get 4. But what God is telling them, no, it's not going to happen that way. They're not going to hear you. And oftentimes, it just makes some things can make so much sense to us. It just makes sense to me. God, why can't we just do it this? Why can't this just happen? And it's so clear to us in our thinking, in our minds. It's just like, and sometimes we can get frustrated with God because he won't allow us to do the common sense thing in our mind. It just seems like, God, this is a no-brainer. But guess what? That's not what he wants you to do.
Because his way is better.
His ways are better. And it's hard sometimes for us to accept that because we think we know how to fix it. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because what does this show you about Paul? Paul he's because who cannot identify with him? I know I can. We all can. And we wonder sometimes, am I doing things, the way you really wanted to do, or am I really going down my own road? And you just going behind me because you're not saying, this is the way I wanted to lead you, but you said you'd never leave me. The Lord said he'll never leave you. So he's with us. But it's interesting to know sometimes, what kind of paths we go that he has not ordained or designed. And it's funny too because there are multiple decisions to be made, and I'm going back to that movie now. All right, there's multiple decisions to be made, multiple ways of trying to find out something. But sometimes something just seems so right, but it wasn't designed. It wasn't the way it was supposed to be. All right, I'm off the movie now. I didn't give nothing away. Don't worry about it. But it was entertaining. I thought it was a good picture. All right, so he's telling them that the Gentiles. I'm appealing to the Gentiles because the Jewish people are not going to hear you. Verse 22. Where am I? Time? Okay, got enough time. It says, and they gave him an audience unto his word, and then lifted up their voices and said, away with such a fellow from the earth. Now, what happened here? He was talking, he was doing all right, he was telling his story, and then all of a sudden, and they gave him an audience unto this word. What word? What word was it that threw the crowd into a frenzy? Who was he talking to? He's talking to the Jewish crowd, right? When he mentioned the word Gentile, that was the word. that made them flip, because he's talking to the who? And the Jewish people were upset. Why are they rioting? Because they thought that Paul brought a what? A Gentile into the temple, right? Which was, back then there wasn't a thing to do. You didn't want to bring him in there, and so now they're upset because he's starting to talk about him being a witness to the Gentiles. And it says, and they gave him audience unto this word, and lifted up their voices and said, away with such a fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should what? That he should live. They want Paul dead now, but then they've been wanting Paul dead for the longest. All right, verse 23. And as they cried and cast off their clothes and threw dust in the air. So they are performing. They are demonstrating. They're crying out loud. They're throwing off their clothes. They're picking up dirt and throwing it in the air to demonstrate how upset they were. They were very dramatic in expressing their frustration. All right? Some people can be dramatic. You ever see somebody when you're driving and you don't like the way they drive and they get dramatic and express their frustration with some kind of sign language?
Fingers up and spitting in your window and yeah.
All right, so there's
Seen all that.
there's a lot of ways people can get dramatic. Well, this is letting us know that this is how dramatic these people were. All right, they were just going. If they trying to let you know, we want this man dead, and bring him on down here. So now what happens is, and keep this in mind, we talked about this in the last couple of chapters. The governors and the captains and the rulers of these different provinces. And at this time, all of Israel and Jerusalem was under the rule of what government? Rome. And Rome was big on order. Things had to be done a certain way. And if you couldn't keep your province from rioting, then you were an unfit captain or unfit governor. They would remove you or have you put to death, because you're going to keep order in Rome. The only chaos they had was chaos that they organized. Right? They were not going to have chaos that happened just, on a fling, spontaneously. No, when we have our riots, we're not our riots, our gladiators and all that, our fighting is organized fighting. We're not going to have any fighting that didn't, okay, so you get the point. All right, so, now, because of that, look at verse 24. And the chief captain commanded him to be brought unto the castle, right? And begged that he should be examined by scourging. Now, what is scourging? Scourging was the truth serum of the day. That basically meant that they were going to get a whip and beat him and get him to tell the truth, that they might know. Well, you can see it right here. That they might know whereof they cried against him. So this is how we're going to know what's going on. Verse 25. And as they brought him, as they bound him with thongs, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman and uncondemned? So now what's going on? They recognize all of a sudden, wait a minute, one of the Roman laws is a privilege of being a Roman citizen is that you didn't get scourged and nothing happened to you until you were actually by law condemned. So now but it only happened to you if you were a what? Roman citizen. Now if you was just somebody passing through with no citizenship and no papers, they beat you to death in Rome. You're like, well, okay, whatever. You had no business walking through here. You're in the wrong neighborhood, so to speak. All right? But if you were a Roman citizen, they couldn't do that to you. So look at verse 26. When the centurion heard that, he went and told to the chief captain, saying, take heed what thou doest, for this man is a Roman. Verse 27. And the chief captain came and said unto him, tell me, art thou a Roman? And he said, yea. 28. And the chief captain answered, with great sum obtained I this freedom. So the captain is saying, he's like, oh, I'm a Roman too. But I paid for mine. So he's like saying, no, we're chummy. I became a Roman citizen, and it cost me X amount of dollars. All right, with a great sum, I obtained this freedom. And look at what Paul says. And Paul said unto him, I was freeborn. Paul was saying, I was born a Roman. Right? I didn't have to buy my Roman citizenship. 29. Then straightway they departed from him and should have examined him. And the chief captain also was what? Afraid. Why was he afraid? Because they had already bound him, and he had already been put in bonds. Was afraid after he knew that he was a Roman because he had bound him. Right. So he had already broken the law because he broke his civil rights of being a Roman. Final verse. It says, on the morrow, because he would have known the certainty whereof he was accused of the Jews, he loosed him from his bands and commanded the chief priests and all of their council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them. Right? So we see the drama continues. It's still not over. This is going on now in the 4th chapter of this drama, of these issues with this uprising. So we'll pick it up again in verse 20 and verse 23. But what do we see here? All right, we see this going on again, where Paul is down there in Jerusalem. Whether he should be in Jerusalem, a lot of people have debate as to it. Some people think that Paul didn't do anything wrong. He was just being a very courageous saint and just saying, well, I don't care what's going to happen to me. I'm going down to Jerusalem. Others look at this and go, well, really, Paul didn't have no business being down there because he was told by the Spirit not to go. And as he recounts here, the Lord Jesus told him to get out of Jerusalem. All right? But either way, he's there. All right? And so now he's got to deal with this aspect that his heart wants so readily, it's just burning in him to just let the Jewish nation, because he feels he can fix it. He feels, I can fix this. Let me just explain to them what happened, and they'll see it my way. But that's not how you open the heart of a person whose heart is bound by sin. A lot of times reason don't crack it. You got to just allow the Lord to do it. And that's the thing that we all got to remember. I can't save anybody. You can't save anybody. What we do is we just let them know, yes, this is what God has done for me. But then when it's all said and done, they got to have an interaction with the Lord Jesus for themselves. And if they don't have that interaction for themselves, they are going to remain isolated no matter what we do. We can still be an example. We can still show godly character, but being an example and showing godly character is not a formula or a recipe to salvation. You have to know Jesus. That's how you get to know the Lord. All right. So, and what we'll see here on as we continue on is it's going to get deeper, because now remember, this captain, he called the Jewish elders, and now he's called who? Paul, and he's going to, because he wants to get to the what? The bottom of this. Number one, I'm getting tired of this mess in my town. All right, I need to get to the bottom of this. All right, y'all got all this ruckus and stuff going on. I ain't trying to lose my job over this. I want to keep my job. I got a nice cushy job here. Things are good, and I want to keep peace because I like being a Roman employee.
Right.
And so he wants Paul and these elders to come together, and y'all need to get y'all stories straight. We need to figure this out. Everybody need to go away, smiling and feeling happy and good and wonderful. Till y'all got to stare at each other till y'all see the love of Jesus in your eyes, so to speak. That's what I used to do with my kids when they when they would act up.
Stand up there having kissing.
I make them stand. I stand face to face,
And look at each
and
other.
you just stare at each other, and you can't. You're gonna stay there as long as it takes until you see the love of Jesus
Inside.
in each other's eyes, and until you can say, "I see the love of Jesus in Amber's eyes," and Amber can say, "I see the love of Jesus in Slim's eyes." Until y'all both can say that, and y'all both gotta say it, y'all just stand there. And I tell you, sometimes they stand there for a while, but eventually they see the love of Jesus because they get tired.
That's the old Southern way.
Yeah. So, but this is what this governor's trying to do. Y'all gonna come together. Y'all gonna have peace. Y'all ain't gonna tear up my town like this. Y'all messing with my employment, so to speak. But at the same time, we know that God is doing things as well. And but
Tearing it up. The gas is going off.
yeah. And so what we'll see here on our next one is some of the discussion, some of the fights that goes on. And Paul is going to be arrested. He's going to be put in bonds. Very similar to what happened with Jesus. Right? They debated with Jesus, and finally they decided, and Pontius Pilate didn't stand up. Pontius Pilate was more concerned about preserving his job than doing what was right. And Pontius Pilate said, well, if the people want Jesus crucified, I see him as a just man. He has not done anything wrong. I see him as honorable. But if that's what the people want, I wash my hands of it. Give him to him, let him. But you can't wash your hands of the when you know things are right, but you gotta stand up for it. You gotta do what's right, and it's important that we do that. And so we'll see Paul's going to do the same thing here, and Paul's going to get in trouble. Paul's going to get bound. Paul's going to get arrested, but that's okay because he's doing what? He's doing the right thing. He's standing up for what is right. All right, and so hopefully these are the lessons that we take with us. Any other comments or questions?